to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hey friends, welcome back to another week here at Robot Unicorn. Today's topic is one that I'm secretly really excited about because as a therapist who supports so many kids who are struggling at school, but actually okay at home, this is a topic that I feel like just comes up over and over again and is not really talked about. I think we talk a lot about kids with challenging behavior and we kind of think their challenging behavior happens everywhere they go. But that's not always the case. Sometimes kids will struggle just at home or just at school. And these cases can be super tricky because it's hard for either the teacher or the parent to understand why they're only struggling in one spot. So today's episode is specifically going to focus on when a child misbehaves or struggles. And I'm putting quotations around misbehaves because we know behavior is actually communication. So these kids are trying to tell us something. But when this only happens at school. So a lot of parents, for example, at school, you have your child's teacher sending you messages and saying, hey, they had a hard day today. They didn't listen. They were sent to the principal's office. Maybe they're riding the school bus and you're getting messages from the school bus driver saying your child's misbehaving on the bus. They're not listening. But when they're at home, you're not seeing these same challenges. So as a parent, it's becoming increasingly difficult for you to talk to your child about these things because at home, you don't see these issues. And this can cause quite the disconnect between a teacher or a principal or even a bus driver and the parent. So today, I want to give you 3 reasons why this happens, like the most common reasons that I see. But of course, there's nuance here, and sometimes it falls outside of these 3 reasons. But I hope that this brings some clarity and some helpfulness, whether you are an educator yourself or whether you're a parent. So let's get into it. Also, I know Scott's not here this episode again. Not to worry, he will be back. But right now, I'm finding it so fulfilling and interesting to do these episodes on my own where I can really just dive deep into these topics for you. Scott's definitely going to be back soon on these episodes where I feel like we really need, that nuanced opinion and those difficult kind of hard-hitting questions. We're bringing Scott back in for those. But right now, I'm really, really enjoying doing these episodes, and I hope you are too. So the first reason why we see kids misbehave, again, I'm saying this in quotations, because behavior is communication. And so whether it is they're interrupting, they're talking out of turn, they're getting into fights with their friends, whatever the behavior is, we want to understand why this is happening, right? So one reason why this happens at school is because of the school environment, right? And this is not to say that the school environment is bad or it's trying to trigger kids. But let's be real, the school environment can be really overstimulating and busy and difficult for some kids, especially our neurodivergent kids or our more sensitive kids. So let's just talk about sensitive/neurodivergent kids for a minute. These kids can have heightened emotional responses and sensitivities to sounds, sights, textures, tastes. And if you think about what school is, there's a lot of kids. It can be really loud. There can be all sorts of sounds happening at the same time. You can have those bright fluorescent lights. Even for me, I'm just if I have to spend a whole day in the bright lights, that feels like a lot. Not only all those things, but there's new expectations at school. There's rules that they may have not had to follow before. There could even be smells in the classroom that they're not used to. So as a sensory experience, school can be a lot for kids, especially kids who maybe don't have all of that going on at home. So I often think about kids whose home life is pretty calm, pretty quiet, definitely not as intense as it is at school. So at home, your child also might have places where they can go and retreat and take a break and not have all this sensory stimulation going on all of the time. Whereas at school, there might not be that spot, or we might not have that in place for them yet. Schools are getting great at having these those sensory rooms, places where kids can go calm down. I love it when a classroom has a quiet corner, a little place where they can go. But not every classroom has that, and not every teacher knows that their student needs that yet, right? So what can happen then is a child's in the classroom, picture like you've got the lights and the sounds, people are singing and someone else is talking and just all this is going on at one time. And if the child doesn't have a better way to say to the teacher, I need a break. I'm getting really overstimulated right now and there's a lot going on, because let's face it, most 6, 7, 8-year-old children can't say that yet. They don't know that's what they need. It's going to come out through behavior. And so the most common thing I see in this situation is this child is getting sent to the principal's office, or they're getting sent to the hallway because they're being loud, they're being impulsive, maybe they're talking out of turn, they're doing behavior that gets them in trouble. And I just get so excited about this, but what happens when they get in trouble? That's my question that I always have. What happens when they get in trouble? Okay, well, they get sent to the principal's office. Oh, okay, so they get sent to a quiet, calm place where they can sit with one person and there's not a lot of lights, sounds, all of this stuff going on, and they can just retreat. Yeah, it makes sense that they're going to engage in that behavior, because whether or not they're realizing they're doing it, they actually need that break in the principal's office. Or children who get sent to the hallway, right? So they get sent, they have to sit in the hall for a little bit, or they get sent, away from their class, whatever it is, they actually need that break. And so without even realizing it, subconsciously, they're engaging in this behavior, like the impulsive yelling, talking out of turn, getting into fights. And what that behavior is communicating with us is this child needs a break. And so the answer isn't actually to punish them or to shame them, but to proactively start to see, okay, this child who gets sent to the principal's office multiple times a day, they need a couple of things. They need some skills to tell us, hey, everything's feeling a lot right now and I'm going to need a little break. Maybe they need the teacher to have a secret signal with them to say, like, I'm going to go to the bathroom for a moment. And we let that student go to the bathroom for a little extra time just to kind of, maybe wash their hands, just be in that quiet bathroom so that they can come and reset. Maybe the class needs a quiet corner. Maybe that child is going to do better if they have earphones or something just to kind of mute the sound when a lot's going on. There's so many things that we can put in place for these kids so that they're not constantly getting in trouble, but we have to get curious. Why is this behavior happening? So I just get so excited. I always get so excited about behavior, but I get so excited about this specifically because instead of punishing them, we can just flip it and be a little more proactive and see that this behavior is just communicating, I need a break. And all we need to do is really teach them a new way to ask for that and teach ourselves how to notice their patterns so that we don't let it get to that point. Anyway, I hope that helps if that might be your child. And just in case your child struggles at home, not at school, same thing at home. Like if you're noticing your child's engaging in that type of behavior because they need a break, well, the same thing happens at home where we punish them, and we send them to their bedroom, we send them to whatever timeout chair, and the punishment is actually them being alone and resetting. So we can just flip it. Instead of phrasing it as a punishment, like you're bad, therefore you have to go to timeout, we can say, hey, it seems like you need a break right now. A lot's going on, and create that special spot for your child where they can go when they need a break and teach them how to ask for that break and give them a secret signal with you that says, hey, my body's starting to get pretty frazzled and I need a quiet corner. When we can do these things proactively, now we're not shaming the child for having this behavior. We're seeing it as communication and we're helping them show them what they need to do. And let's be honest, if we can teach our kids at an early age to start to notice the signs in their body that say, this is too much and I'm going to need a break. Think about yourself even now. I think about myself as a mom. That is something I had to learn as a mother because I was getting so overstimulated by my children all the time, especially in the early years when they were clinging to me, whining, crying, and I needed a break and I needed to learn how to get that for myself because it was starting to come out in my behavior. I was still having that same overstimulated behavior, which includes yelling, getting really angry, getting maybe rage cleaning my house. That's my behavior that I was having that was actually signaling I'm overstimulated. I need to reset myself. And so I had to learn as an adult how to go to the bathroom, splash cold water on my face, give myself a moment to just regulate and calm myself down, or at least get to a place where I wasn't going to be so frazzled before I returned to my kids. Right? So we sometimes have to learn this as adults too, but what a gift if we can start to teach this to our children early on. So let's also talk about the school environment. So this is still reason one that children, misbehave or get in trouble a lot at school. We talked about if they're sensitive, but another reason the environment can be tricky for kids at school is that for our active kids, and specifically for our younger kids who really do need to play, they need to move, they need to be active, school can feel restrictive for these kids. And sometimes it is. And sometimes classrooms and the curriculum that teachers have to teach doesn't always align with what a child developmentally needs. We know in these little ages, kids need to play. They need to be able to run around. They need to be able to have this physical output that they can give, right? That you get when you run on the playground or you push things or you're trying the monkey bars or you're going down the slide. For a lot of kids, they need that. And some kids might need more of that physical activity than others. And specifically, there is really interesting research, and I don't have it on me right now, but I can definitely do a future episode on this, that children, the younger they start JK, so junior kindergarten or senior kindergarten, kids with the later birthdays tend to struggle more in school. And it makes sense because they're just that much of a developmentally younger and needing more of that play, more of that free time, more physical activity. And so when those kids who are younger are in these classes and they're being expected to sit for long periods of time, it comes out in their behavior. These kids aren't bad. They just need to move their bodies more. And so sometimes we don't see any of these challenges at home because at home, parents might understand, okay, my son needs a lot of outdoor time, so I'm giving him that time. He can go run around and play. Whereas at school, he doesn't have that time and he's being forced to sit for long periods of time or sit at circle time or whatever it is. And so he's struggling at school when in reality, maybe the expectation isn't super realistic. And that's actually often not the fault of the educator, it's just a greater system challenge that we have where we're giving kids less playtime, less time to run around in school than actually we ever have before in history. So you might notice that if your child needs more of that physical activity, they're struggling to sit for prolonged periods of time, and they're struggling to control the impulse to move their bodies. They might even struggle to use their indoor voices or keeping their hands to themselves. So this can be really difficult. And then the answer to this is often, how can we incorporate more play and physical activity? And sometimes the help of an OT can be really helpful too at school, where how can they get that pushing pillows around the classroom, hanging off the monkey bars. Maybe these kids who are really struggling because they need more movement, maybe they're the helpers in the class and they have to carry heavy books down the hall to a different classroom. So we can get creative in our solutions, but often we do need to look at, are their physical needs being met when they're in school, and also their needs for play. So this is really important. And to be honest, that alone could be an entire podcast episode, but hopefully that just plants that seed in your mind as you're getting curious about your own child's behavior. Now, one last piece about environment is some kids can feel a little bit like they have no control over their school day. Okay, so I think specifically about the strong-willed kids or the kids who really need to feel like they have that sense of, I have a say in my day. And this often can come out in our neurodivergent kids as well, who have that really strong sense of justice, and why am I doing this? Why are you making me sit here? Those kids, they often struggle because they don't have any control over what happens when they get to school. And sometimes when they're at home, they can make choices. They can decide, between a couple of different things that they want to do. But at school, everything is outside of their control. They have to follow the teacher the whole entire day, and they don't necessarily have a say. And when that happens, for some children, it can bring up this impulse of I need to have a say in my day. I feel helpless. I feel like I don't have a sense of control or autonomy, and people are telling me what to do the entire day, and I don't like the things that people are telling me what to do. So then we see a bit more of that strong-willed behavior come up as they try to take back a sense of control. And in these situations, this actually will kind of go into one of our other reasons, but one of the things is these kids need to really trust their teacher and know that the teacher has their best interests at heart. And if the child doesn't feel that connection with the teacher, we're going to see even more of that strong-willed behavior at school. And then for some of these kids, they actually need to know the why. Why do we have to do this subject? Why do I have to go to gym class? Why do I have to do this? Some kids, like they really thrive when they have a logical explanation about why they're learning certain things. And I think that's fair. I want my kids to ask these kind of questions. And again, that goes back to they need to have that trusting relationship with that teacher. And then sometimes for these kids, we do have to ask ourselves, oh, do they have a sense of control anywhere over their school day? And maybe they don't. And maybe that's something that we can get curious about and see structured choices where the teacher is still the one in charge, which is very, very important, but maybe they can help the child have some sense of control over some like little structured choices throughout the school day. So that's another thing that can be really helpful. Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, "Thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy." And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurtured First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurture First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it. Okay, so let's get into reason 2. So reason 1, once again, was environments, and we looked at being overstimulating, which I think is the case for just so many of the kids who struggle in school. The school environment feeling restrictive and feeling like they don't have enough time for play and movement, which I think is also one of the leading causes to kids struggling in school, especially our little kids. And then feeling helpless, like they have no sense of control over their environment. So that brings us to reason 2, which might be one of the most important things as well. I mean, everything's important, right? I hope you can see how excited I get about this topic, but connection to the teacher. This is huge, and it's so underrated. When a child doesn't feel that sense of connection, like my teacher gets me, they like me, they love me, they delight in me, they want me to be here at school, there will be pushback. Because when your child's at school, their teacher is the person that they look to because you're not there. So that is the person that they hopefully will have that sense of attachment to, that sense of closeness with, not in the same way that they have with their parent. Of course, it's different. But I like to see teachers or educators as a really important part of our child's village, the adults who are pouring into our child, who care about them and who are supporting them. So when a child gets a sense from a teacher that this teacher doesn't like me, and I hear this a lot from the kids that I work with, where they'll say things like, "Oh, my teacher definitely doesn't like me. My teacher thinks that all I do is try and misbehave. My teacher tells me every day I need to be better tomorrow." I hear this stuff from the kids that I work with all the time. And what I see a huge difference is if the kiddo I'm working with who has some very real struggles that are going on for themselves at school, let's say because they're overstimulated, because they need to play more, but they believe in their heart that their teacher loves them and wants them to do well, they are more willing to continue to go to school, to continue to try, to continue to want to work at these challenging behaviors. And on the flip side, the kiddos that I work with they believe in their heart that their teacher does not like them, that they have failed their teacher, that they are a disappointment in class, which unfortunately is a lot of kiddos that I work with, they shut down. And there becomes a part of them that does not want to work well for that teacher anymore. And that is a real struggle, because then what happens is, and I have so much empathy for teachers, the teacher is burnt out. often not just by this one child, but by all the kids in their class that they're supporting with often very little resources, and support for themselves as a teacher. And they're feeling burnt out and exhausted. And it's hard to deal with this child's behavior every single day in class. And so sometimes that can come out in just not feeling that attachment that they have with that student, right? And I think that's totally understandable and it makes sense. And often finding ways for that teacher to find some softness back for the student and to see the good in them and to see that they want to do well in school and to get curious about why they're behaving this way is often the answer to starting to make real change in the classroom. So kids really need a couple of things from their teacher, their authority figure at school. One, they need to know that this person cares about them and wants them to do well and believes that they can do well. They need to know those things. They also need this person to be an authority figure. So a teacher shouldn't show up as a child's best friend and even, into high school. They do need to show up as an authority figure the same way we talk about parents needing to show up as an authority figure and parents needing to be kind of in charge and that leader. A child needs to be able to also, and I think this is something that Dr. Gordon Neufeld talks about a lot, rest in the leadership of their teacher. So what this means is that the teacher has to show up high in warmth. That's that delight and that love, but also has to have the expectations and the firmness and the ability to hold boundaries with the kid as well. And I see this in so many of the great teachers I work with where they have these high expectations for kids. They'll send the homework back and be like, I know you can do a better job on this. They will see the good and they will challenge the kids, but they will also do that with warmth and loving, not with like disappointment and resentment towards a child, if that makes sense. So if your child's really struggling at school, I would always be curious about what the relationship is like with their authority figures at school. And if that relationship isn't there, a couple things like for parents, be really careful how you talk about your child's teacher in front of them, even if you have issues with your child's teacher. Teachers will tell me, oh, I can tell that, or I know for a fact that their parent doesn't like me because the child will tell me all sorts of things that their parent said about me. Well, this is often really counterproductive because the child then shows up to school with that bias about the teacher. And once again, they're less willing to respect them and want to work with them. And at the same time, obviously, if a teacher is truly treating your child poorly, like we need to explore that and get curious about why that's happening and protect our kids always. That's our first responsibility as parents. But the same, I know a lot of educators listen to this podcast as well. The same goes for us as educators. And I've worked with so many educators who are here. If you're feeling that resentment, bitterness towards a student, getting curious about what that is for you as well, that those feelings of burnout, those feelings of helplessness, those feelings of like, I just can't deal with this behavior. And also getting curious about how you can get the support that you need and maybe changing your perspective as well and being like, I'm not going to be able to work with this kid if I have these feelings towards them. So is there any softness that I can find towards the situation, towards this child's parents, towards this child? Because that is really where you'll be able to start to get some good work done with this child. The other thing I do want to remind educators about is that control that you have and that authority figure leadership that you bring will be important for that child. But what that looks like isn't actually punishing, like we were talking about when I was saying how the kids are behaving this way because they're communicating something. It actually looks like, how can I be proactive? How can I take the lead, right? I know this child at 1:00 in the afternoon every day when we get back from recess is so wired after recess. And really, they probably need to keep moving their body a little more before they can settle into class. So instead of waiting for them to have this big behavioral outburst, and then I send them to the principal's office, maybe we put something in place where when they get in from recess, their job is to sweep up the classroom, or their job is to bring this big stack of books over to the principal's office. And I know they don't really have to do that, and I don't really need help with that, but I know that they're not quite ready to transition to sitting yet. So I'm going to get them to do this work that still keeps them moving, but slowly brings them back to a place where they can sit in the classroom. That's leadership as a teacher, because you are looking at what the child needs and you're trying to do it proactively. And again, so much compassion for teachers, because how are you supposed to do that for 30 kids in a classroom, right? So again, I think I've talked about this on other episodes. I will share okay, this is the ideal situation, but I know we can't always do that. And we also have to have so much grace on our educators because they are under a lot of pressure. And so sometimes as parents, if we see these patterns, we can also say, hey, here's an idea, and try and suggest that, because when we can work collaboratively together, that's when the best outcomes happen. So let's go into the third and another really common reason why kids struggle at school and not necessarily at home. And I see this as kids get into the older grades, but this can also happen in the younger years. But this one is peer influence. So I will often see kids who misbehave or act out in class or act silly or whatever it is because they're trying to gain the approval of their peers. Now, as kids get older, we know, and especially in these middle years, that their focus kind of shifts away from, oh, I really want to impress my caregiver or my teacher, to I want to be connected and belong to my group of peers. So this is where we see kids maybe trying to be accepted, acting in ways they otherwise wouldn't because they want to gain approval from their peers. They might even one time, they say something out loud in class and everybody laughs, and then they're like, oh, aha, if I act like the class clown, or if I speak out in class, or if I interrupt, or if I'm rude, I get acceptance and everybody thinks it's funny. So then they keep doing that behavior. Kids will also have more struggles at school if they don't have any connection with their peers or if there's conflict. I mean, my oldest daughter is 9. And I see this in a lot of girls that I have worked with and boys kind of around that age, like 7 to end of elementary school, where now we're having issues with friends. And educators can't possibly keep track on all the drama that happens every day at recess between children and their friends, but it does happen. And so we don't always know what has happened in that 30 minutes of lunchtime. But even what I hear about from my daughter, it's like sometimes things can be totally fine, and then they have lunch, and then a little fight breaks out, and now so-and-so is crying, and so-and-so is mad at this person, and now they're trying to transition back to class and learning, and that's really tough. So as educators and as parents, if a child's really struggling at school or doesn't want to go to school or says they hate school, we definitely need to be curious about what is going on within these friendships, within these peer-to-peer relationships. Is there a new struggle? Is the child feeling left out? Is there a conflict? Is the child the bully? What's going on? Getting curious about this is huge for understanding why a child does or does not want to go to school as well. So I hope that this really helped you see a few reasons why kids might have more struggles at school than they do at home. At home, especially for those of us who have these really safe, nurturing homes for our children, where we're understanding our child needs to play, our child needs to run around, we're working with our kids. Sometimes it can be really confusing. It's like, well, they're totally fine. Why are they fine at home and they struggle at school? And it's not actually about blaming the school, but it's about getting curious about what's different there and why our child might need different behavior to communicate their struggles at school. One other thing that we did not talk about that I just do want to mention before I wrap up this episode is one other reason kids might struggle at school where they don't struggle at home is when our home life has not enough, let's say, expectations of our kids, when we do everything for our kids at home. So for example, for parents who really struggle to hold boundaries, who struggle to allow their kids to be disappointed at home, or in homes where children have a lot of access to screens and spend the majority of their time at home on a screen, and they don't have to do, let's say, chores around the house. They spend most of their free time on a tablet or on a screen or gaming. These kids also really struggle to transition to school because the expectations at school maybe actually are realistic for their developmental age and for what their peers can do. But when they're up really late playing games and they don't get enough sleep, or their brain is now used to getting this constant stream of dopamine from being on a screen, or when at home they don't have expectations and their parents can't follow through with the boundaries, or they're so busy. I see this a lot in children who are so overscheduled and they actually don't have the time that they require to rest and to play and to just have relaxing evenings at home where they feel connected to their family. They don't have that. And so then they're just constantly too busy. They're constantly overworked and they never have that downtime. Those kids also struggle a lot more at school. Even if you don't see those struggles at home because you're so busy, it maybe comes out at school instead. So there's also reasons sometimes where it is some of the things that are going on at home. The child might not be struggling at home, but they might not be struggling because they're busy on a tablet the whole time that they're at home and they don't have expectations on them and they don't have to interact with people because they're on the tablet the whole time. And now they're expected to be at school where they have to interact with people all day and talk and not be on their tablet. And that can be really tough too. And I say that not in a way to shame parents because I know I'm going to get that comment. And that's where I'm sure Scott would go if he was on here right now. But that is something that I hear a lot about from educators who are really struggling with students. So we do have to talk about what is going on at home and in those situations where kids aren't struggling at home, but possibly that is because of not having boundaries that are set, parents who are doing everything for their kids and not allowing them to be disappointed or frustrated or have to do things themselves, kids who are on the tablets, kids who don't go to bed until super, super late, and then they show up at school and they're exhausted and they're tired and they don't have the sleep that they need. These situations also really need to be looked at, and it's something that I hear a lot about from educators, and possibly that's a whole other podcast episode that we have. But if you can relate to any of those things, get curious about that with compassion on yourself as well. If you're like, you know what, shoot, that is my kid. They pretty much, when they get home from school, I let them unwind on the tablet. They're on the tab, but then they don't want to get off it. And I'm uncomfortable setting that boundary. And now they're on the tablet the entire night and they're on there till late and they're in the room and I forget to tell them to turn it off. And all of a sudden it's 11. If that's you, just get curious with yourself about what that is and what's going on and maybe how you can set some different boundaries at home to help them be successful at the school day as well. So if you want more on this topic, there's just so much I could say. This is I'm getting excited about it because it's one of my favorite topics and something that I think I want to talk about more and I want to see talked about more. And let me know. I'm sure there'll be lots of thoughts on this episode. So send us an email, send us a DM on Robot Unicorn. Let us know what else on this topic you'd like us to touch on. And I will be back again next week. Thank you guys so much. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.